Everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, and I'm collaborating for the second time with two incredible supply chain voices. Following the success of our recent webinar, Parcel Shipping and Style Supply Chain Brain have joined forces with me and the team at Let's Talk Supply Chain to host Reveal, the leading parcel shipping intelligence platform, for another unmissable discussion. So join me in offering a warm welcome once again to Michael Falls, Vice President of Client Success at Reveal. And we're also joined by the fabulous Melanie Kirk, Director of Supply Chain and E-commerce Operations at Boot Barn. So thank you both so much for joining me. Now, before we dive in, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions just to get you a little bit warmed up for everybody. So Michael, what about supply chain keeps you up at night? What's the ultimate supply chain horror story that makes your blood run cold?
Well, thanks so much for the warm introduction, Sarah. And that's a great question. And frankly, there are a lot of directions I could go with my answer here, but I'm going to share a story with you from just last week that I think will really set the stage for today's discussion. I was at a trade show last week, which I know you actually attended and spoke at, Sarah. And there was a company at the conference who does parcel audit and consulting. And by consulting, I mean they help shippers negotiate carrier rate agreements. So one of the executives from this company actually stopped by Reveal's booth and said something to me that I haven't been able to get out of my head since it happened. He said, I just don't understand why you guys, meaning Reveal, are so focused on creating the software you developed. In the consulting space, we're just printing money.
What?
That's what he said. He said in the consulting space, we're just printing money. And Sarah, you know what that means, right? That means that shippers are being taken advantage of by the very consulting firms that they're trusting to help them navigate the lack of transparency in carrier pricing and billing. And it's just mind-blowing to think about. That lack of transparency between carriers and shippers has created this entire consulting industry, but there's also clearly a lack of transparency between consultants and their shipper clients, which is leading shippers to be taken advantage of. So either way, whether it's from the carrier or the consultant, the shipper loses because of a lack of transparency. And so that's really what keeps me up at night, or to borrow your other expression, it's what makes my blood run cold.
Well, and a horror story for any shipper listening. Holy moly, I can't believe that actually happened, but I appreciate you for sharing that story. Now, Melanie, I'm going to bring you in. If you had superpowers, what's the one thing you would revolutionize in supply chain?
Wow, superpowers. Well, I hope I would get a fancy superhero name first to go with the superpowers.
Yes, you will.
Awesome. I think for me, what I would do is I would transform the carrier side of the supply chain industry. And to use a superhero term, I would vanquish surcharges. I would get rid of the residential surcharges, the DAS, the EDAS, the remote area, certainly the peak season surcharges. Get rid of them all and just basically go all but flat rate on the entire pricing structure. That would make my job a lot easier for sure. May make it less beneficial to the company, but I'll take an easy day.
I love that. Well, and it reminds me kind of one of those game shows on TV. I can't remember what it's called, but they have no whammos. And when the whammos come up, they have a superhero cape and they erase all the money on the board. So I feel like that's what you would be doing with all of those surcharges. All right. Well, I love those answers. I mean, they definitely give me some insight into how both of your minds work. Now let's get to it. So today we are diving into the really interesting story of how Boot Barn revamped its parcel shipping game to save costs and boost efficiency across its stores and online platforms. We're going to go behind the scenes, discover the strategies and the tools fueled Boot Barn's success, and of course, learn about the role of Reveal's parcel spend optimization solutions played in Boot Barn's incredible transformation. And we want to hear from you as well. And we're going to have a Q&A a little bit later on. We had some great insightful questions in our last webinar, and we know that issues like cost, optimization, and efficiency are really important to businesses right now. So I'm sure you're going to have lots of questions. Make sure to put those into the Q&A section that are on your screen, and we'll get to those a little bit later on. So, parcel shipping costs are big outlays for retailers, outlays that can significantly impact margins and influence consumers' purchasing decisions online. And those costs are rising. According to recent data, the average cost per package in the US was $9.33 in 2022, and that's up 6.75% year on year. And a large part of that expense is down to the fact that parcel shipping spend is incredibly difficult for organizations to manage proactively because complexity and the many variables involved. So, how can retailers tackle this ever growing problem? Well, we're going to explore all of that today, and we're going to dive into a more strategic approach to that optimization, how you can leverage technology, and so much more. And I know you're excited to find out. So let's just jump in and get started. So, Michael, I shared some stats in that intro. We shared some big numbers in the last webinar as well. So, can you set the scene for us a little bit? You know, Melanie is going to share Boot Barn's specific challenges in a moment, but what's your perspective on the general challenges in the market right now when it comes to parcel shipping and spend?
Sure. Well, the first thing that we talked about was lack of transparency, or at least the first thing I shared. And it just struck me as you were reading that number about the average cost per package increasing by about 6.75% year over year. What's interesting is if you follow the general rate increases from the major carriers, that number is higher than the general rate increase, right? So there's something buried in the way that pricing works that's actually leading to higher increases in average cost per package. And again, that's part of that lack of transparency. But, the market in general, which is what you asked about, it's a great question. I could certainly talk about how we kind of generally see the market right now, which is basically that there's plenty of carrier capacity for shippers today, which has been caused by a combination of economic factors on the demand side, as well as new carrier entries. But in turn, shippers have more leverage in their carrier relationships than they had over the past few years. And that leverage certainly extends to pricing on carrier contract negotiations. But frankly, none of what I just said will likely stand out to the audience because none of that information is new. I think what I can really bring to the conversation today is that what we're seeing emerge in the market is that shippers who are leveraging the right next gen cutting edge technology solutions are the ones winning in supply chain today. And this is especially true of parcel spend management solutions. There are so many kind of legacy platforms out there that deliver their services through consultants and analysts. And my intention is not to knock those solutions, but let's be real, this is 2024. The technology exists to replace legacy platforms. And that's a really good thing for shippers who are recognizing that and investing in the right modern solutions. And at Reveal, we really call that the migration from 1.0 to 2.0, at least in the parcel spend management space.
Well, and especially with your first story around what happened at that trade show last week, there's a lot of money out on the table, and we need to be able to bring that back to the table for shippers. So in this difficult market, how can parcel spend management help retailers stay competitive by optimizing their shipping operations?
Yeah, well, you just made the point. There's a lot at stake here right now. There's a lot of money on the table. And, I'll be very candid, Sarah. I mean, the difference between a middle tier parcel spend management solution and a best in class parcel spend management technology solution can really mean a difference in millions or even tens of millions of dollars for shippers in unnecessary shipping costs. And if you're on the call today and you're a smaller shipper, think of it as a difference in as much as 10 or 20 or even 30% of your overall transportation spend. That's just spent, right? I mean, beyond that, think about workflow and reporting efficiencies. I mean, we're talking about potentially a difference in dozens of hours per week in eliminating repeatable tasks. And we're also talking about vast differences in accuracy on critical reporting deliverables, which would include executive strategy reports and accruals, budgeting, forecasts. So in other words, the stakes are high and very high, right? And so I think the question becomes, how does parcel spend management create value for shippers, which we really think of in 5 core areas, which I'll just cover really quickly to answer your question. But, number one is analytics. You've got to be able to wrap your arms around your data in a way that makes sense to your business. Number 2 is contract management. There's a lot to manage with your agreements, from revenue tiers to GRIs to managing and monitoring term expirations within a contract. Number three is audit, right? Which the audience is probably pretty familiar with, but a comprehensive audit protects you from overbilling, incorrect billing, and gets you, your money back on service guarantees for late packages. Number four is finance automation, which really means generating automated, integrated, and accurate transportation finance deliverables like GL coding and accruals. And then number five is advanced modeling and simulations so that shippers have access to the best data science and cutting edge AI and machine learning technology. So that was a long answer, but that's really when I referred earlier to Parcel Spend Management 2.0, that encompasses kind of the next gen toolkit that shippers can leverage to optimize their shipping operations and ultimately achieve their three desired outcomes, which is reduce costs drastically, optimize transit times to hit delivery commitments to customers, and eliminate non-value added workflow.
Absolutely. Melanie, you're nodding your head, and we're going to bring you into the conversation because I know we're going to go all through that story. Do you agree with some of the things that Michael is talking about? And did you sort of go through all those processes?
I am feeling all of that. He is speaking my language.
I love that. I love that. Awesome. So one last thing, Michael, before we get to Melanie, can you share some examples with us of how Parcel Spend Management has directly impacted retailers' bottom lines in terms of cost savings and maybe those operational efficiencies that you just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the examples I'll share here are exactly what gets me fired up to come to work and support our customers every day. So I'll rattle off a handful. At the extremely high impact end of the spectrum, I think about an e-com shoe and apparel retailer, not Boot Barn, who was planning to make a change in their multi-carrier strategy just as they were onboarding onto Reveal software. And our software actually identified through our agreement monitoring that this company's strategy would end up costing them $6 million in additional UPS fees because their carrier change would move them out of their current revenue tier, which is something they had not accounted for in their analysis. And to be frank, the consulting firm they were using at the time also missed in their analysis. So that example is massive, right? $6 million in cost avoidance, but that wasn't the end for even that customer, right? So customer implements our software and was able almost immediately to identify shipping lanes where packages could be downgraded from an express service level to a ground service, which then resulted in over $1 million in additional annual savings. So we're talking about $7 million in the first couple of months, and they were able to achieve that without delaying any transit times on those lanes that they made adjustments to. So I mean, those are really high impact examples, but some of the examples that might resonate with the audience might be more in like the low hanging fruit category where there's material impact for minimal lift, right? In other words, super high ROI. So, for example, I'll share three. Like our technology identified we had a customer whose team was unnecessarily shipping every store fixture using a next day early AM service level. Once our technology identified the opportunity, the retailer disabled the ability for their team to ship to stores using next day early AM, and poof, they saved $250,000 in annualized costs.
Wow.
I think about the shipper who changed ERP software and made a mistake in configuring their carrier payment terms. Our technology detected that they were subject to hundreds of thousands of dollars in carrier late payment fees so quickly that the company was actually able to recover the fees with their carriers and avoid future late payments, right? And again, to credit carriers, I talked about carriers with lack of transparency, but again, carriers are there to serve as a partner to shippers, and carriers will often behave as a good faith partner, right? And they did in this case. Right. Another example, the final one I'll share, is a fast-growing athleisure brand who's using our technology to identify recurring address corrections and eliminate tens of thousands of dollars in just avoidable surcharges with very minimal lift, just updating addresses in their system. So I could keep going for days. I'll stop there for now, but hopefully, these are a few examples that illustrate how the right parcel spend management technology can uniquely impact retailers' bottom lines in terms of both cost savings and operational efficiencies.
Well, and I go back to your first example, right? Even that disruption of, moving it into a different tier and, possibly having that $6 million as a loss, right? Because you're going to move it and you're going to actually spend more on your parcels. There's also the disruption on the delivery of those goods, which will disrupt your client, which means they may or may not come back and buy from you, which is just as important as everything else that you had shared with us. Now, we want to go on to Boot Barn's journey with you and really get into the nitty-gritty of your challenges and transformation. So, Melanie, can you give us an overview of what Boot Barn's situation looked like, prior to partnering with Reveal? What were the challenges you were facing when it came to managing parcel shipping costs across your network of stores and your e-commerce platforms?
Sure. I don't imagine that Boot Barn's experience is unique in what we encountered coming out of COVID. The whole parcel transportation business became much more competitive at that time. It was not at all a buyer's, or I guess a shipper's market in these terms. Between our current contracts expiring discounts and waivers, higher fuel surcharges, peak demand surcharges, I'll mention those again.
All the things that we want to erase with your
all the things I shall
superpower.
vanquish. Yeah, no, it was obvious we needed to do something to temper the ever increasing cost for us to ship a package. So a little background on us. Prior to partnering with Reveal, our parcel supply chain operation, it entailed both store distribution. I mean, it still does, but 2 distribution centers, hundreds of vendors across the U.S., shipping to any of our, I think it was 300 stores at the time, and receiving centers, as well as some e-commerce fulfillment. And with the rollout of our in-store fulfillment program a few years ago, we're also now shipping from any one of our stores, vendors and retail stores. So challenges, I would say first, our rates and terms with our longtime primary parcel carriers. They were okay, certainly compared to rack rates. But over time, we're losing favorability. The discounts are shrinking on a number of our heavily used accessorials. And as we've grown our store count and continue to do so for the foreseeable future, as well as increasing sales in our e-com channel, this meant we were looking at not only paying to ship more packages, but pay more to ship more packages. So definitely the first, probably the biggest challenge. Secondly, our ability to maintain situational awareness of our shipping costs at a service level and the option to even drill further into that, or look at it from other angles, was requiring a lot more effort over time. So many data points that play into that. So many moving parts. It's just, I can get lost in the weeds just looking at that kind of thing. So from our store distribution centers and many suppliers, we were dealing with parcels, varying dimensions, originating from any point in the United States, going to any other point in the United States. Same thing with our e-commerce fulfillment. And then our volume was increasing. But it's not constant. In November and December, our volume will actually quadruple what it does in, say, the non-peak time of year. And so, again, peak surcharge impacting our residential shipping costs during those months. So trying to factor all of those moving parts and the fluctuating volume and all of that in. So from the standpoint of situational awareness, while we had access to analytics and reporting from another partner, it gave us some visibility into into what we were spending, possible savings opportunities, but it wasn't always reliable. Some of the reporting required periodic maintenance, somebody manually to go in and update it, or else we wouldn't actually be seeing a report with the most current data. Yeah, scary to look at something and go, wait a minute, that looks like last week's numbers or last month's numbers, where somebody wasn't watching. And beyond that, also the reporting wasn't as robust as what we now have with Reveal's platform. So the more our company grew, the more we spent with parcel shipping, the more important, obviously, it became to us to really have a way to keep an eye on everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you've got so many moving parts and so many moving shipments from one end to the other, I mean, it's so hard to manage. And if you've got to go in and do something manually, I mean, you're setting yourself up for human error, right? I mean, anything can happen. And if you're doing it that way, are we on version 1, 2, 3, 34? How do we keep track of those types of things? So I want to ask you, how did you initially identify sort of that need for a proactive approach to your parcel shipping management? Was there a tipping point? Was there a set of circumstances that led you to say, wait a second, we need to take back control of this?
Yeah. Yeah. Big tipping point. I mean, the aforementioned changes, the ones that came about post-COVID, coupled with the fact that we had a carrier contract coming up on its expiration, it just was like the perfect opportunity. So we had plans to add, I think we did 50 stores last year. We're on track for another 60 stores this year.
Wow.
Yeah. We're going to keep
growth.
on trucking. We knew we were looking at several more years of increased volume. And so it was imperative to pursue a comprehensive new agreement, and it needed to be built more for our shipping operation as exists now versus the one, 3, 4, 5 years ago when we negotiated the last contract before COVID. So in support of being able to achieve that goal and position ourselves to leverage all of the benefits of a new contract, we knew we needed a better view, a broader, deeper view of our spend at any given point in time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm sure when you decided, when that tipping point kind of happened and that set of circumstances where you're like, okay, we need something better than what we're currently doing right now. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of different options out there, right? There's lots of competition. I mean, even, Michael was talking about earlier consulting versus technology and sort of what do you do and how do you do that? So what were some of the factors that influenced your decision to partner with Reveal, right? What made Reveal the right partnership? And maybe if you have some questions that you went into it with to figure out who was the right partner, that would be really great as well.
So what made Reveal the right partnership? To start with, I'd say their knowledge of the industry. There's a lot of us here at Boot Barn who can say we've got knowledge of the industry and experience working with carriers, but really it's one-sided, right? As the shipper, as the people that are paying these carriers. We valued the perspective that Reveal brought to the table, right? I think there's plenty of people there that have that firsthand experience on the carrier side and or if not also the consulting side, right? So we wanted to leverage their expertise and perspective. And really it's come in very handy in negotiating the new terms we have with the carrier. We had an opportunity early on in conversations to actually demo and explore a lot of their reporting tools.
Okay.
They arranged a few Zoom calls actually to go over a lot of these reports. It was great. I mean, the time that they spent to really go through and say, here's what we have. Here's ways you can use it, use cases that maybe we hadn't considered. It provided quick and easy visibility to how we're spending our money on shipping. And also gave us the option to dive in and look at the underlying details as well, to really investigate things down to a specific transaction or scenario. So let's see. They also custom reporting. So there are some reports that we had from a prior provider that really helped suit specific business needs on our accounting team and other functional areas. And they jumped right in and were ready to support the additional requests to be able to accommodate those business needs. So put together a process to handle our GL coding for carrier invoices, and built a few other reports that our accounting team uses. So between the standard and custom reporting, it's really given us a single touch point for our company to use for comprehensive reporting related to our spend.
Well, and Michael, I want to bring you in just for a second to talk a little bit about what that looks like. It sounds like you spend a lot of hands-on time with the customer, really getting to understand who they are, what they're looking for, and how you can really tailor your platform and solution, not only to what they think they need, but also what maybe they don't even know they need.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was thinking about this coming into today's meeting. Melanie, there's probably not a week that goes by that our teams aren't interacting and collaborating on, kind of open initiatives or, new ideas that have been brought forth. Sometimes it's an everyday thing. Technology is still a partnership, right? Because to Melanie's point, there are subject matter experts on the Reveal end that can help unlock the power of, the technology that we have. But at the end of the day, Melanie, I hope it's okay. I'm going to share a metric. I was looking at our user data in our platform for the month of May, and there were 70 unique logins from Boot Barn into our platform, right?
Wow.
In the month of May. So part of the answer to your question, Sarah, is it's not always Boot Barn coming to us, right? More often than not, it's Boot Barn logging into our technology and using the analytics and the actionable insights and things like that to self-serve, right? Which is actually what gets us the most excited.
Well, and that metrics goes to show the collaboration internally in the Boot Barn teams as to who's utilizing the data and really how well you're utilizing the platform as well, because 70 is a big number. So, Melanie, can you share some examples of the benefits Boot Barn has realized since implementing Reveal's shipping intelligence platform, maybe particularly in terms of cost savings and operational efficiency, which we're focusing on today?
Sure. Using Reveal's platform, I would say we're able to see and I guess I've mentioned this before, a high level, the dashboard, key metrics that everybody wants to know about, but also granularly the opportunities to pursue during conversations with our primary parcel carriers back in the negotiation phase. We were leveraging the reporting, the modeling features, the agreement modeling. We were able to really focus on impactful areas where we knew then we would want to insist on seeing price reductions in those areas with regards to negotiation. So I guess on the topic of negotiation, the end result is we actually came away with very, very favorable terms, relevant favorable terms that actually fit our operation. Otherwise, I would say that the vital factors and the other metrics reporting, there is convenient call outs where we stand relative to our peers in the industry. We can track our per package. Love the benchmarking. Really it's just a full view of how effectively we're managing our new carrier terms, how we're doing year over year, how we're doing week to week. So.
And what about the ability to forecast shipping expenses accurately and maybe anticipate some of those carrier rates and surcharges that we want to get rid of with your superpower?
Yeah. You can definitely count on the platform to call those out. That was one of the differences we realized from our prior provider is there's insights that tell you, hey, in September you have this expiring, in October you have this expiring. We saw that in action last year, actually, when we had a couple of items that were set to expire over time. So it was really nice to just have that right in front of you to go, hey, you need to make sure you course correct to get around that when those come. Mm-hmm. And again, going back to the high level and granular views of historical shipping, the activity behind the spend, at a high level, being able to quickly reference how our total net spend breaks out between transportation and surcharge. And I sometimes wince when I see how much we're paying in surcharges. Some of the key metrics reported on their platform that we focus on. So average cost per package, how we're tracking overall, how much of our volume is hitting minimums, what are our average weights or average zones. Then being able to dive into any of those and get to different levels of the details or any of our service specific volume metrics skewing those averages and take that information away as an action item if needed. We also use the exception reporting, address corrections, I think Michael may have mentioned, to identify some areas of opportunity. I mean, our stores, for the most part, stay where they are from week to week. So if we have vendors that can't get the address right, course correct those and we're set. We've automatically eliminated any recurrence of that from that vendor going forward. So it's really been a benefit to have, just a quick way to pull that and see and address those with the vendors. Other penalty transactions, the shipping adjustments where maybe the DIMs weren't stated properly up front, and then you get hit with an audit fee after that, being able to go in and see all of those exceptions and say, what do we need to do? Is it a training matter? Is it, what's behind this? But just having visibility to access that. We we track our ongoing weekly spend. Some cases we leverage the underlying data and basically just it's a chance to course correct on the exceptions. So those are some of the areas that we've been able to use and see improvements in our spend.
Well, and it's not just those areas of improvements, but also like areas of opportunity. That's what I'm hearing when you're talking through some of the different options and ways that you're working with this platform. One of the other things that I wanted to ask you about, because you have talked about maximizing cost savings, negotiating carrier agreements. What about compliance? Right? Because compliance is a really big topic. And especially when you're looking at carrier agreements, you want to make sure that obviously you're being compliant, they're being compliant. How has the platform helped you with that?
So in terms of, let's see, when you say compliance, in what regard would you be speaking?
Well, I was thinking about the shipping contracts, and maybe Michael, you want to jump in here and talk about sort of this compliance aspect, because not only like obviously everybody wants to have and maximize that cost savings, but when you're negotiating with a carrier, there is cost. There's also, the shipper bringing the data to the table, but then there's also compliance and making sure that the carrier is doing what they're saying that they're going to do, and that you're saying that you're doing what you're saying and what you're bringing to the table as well, as far as, volumes and different, ways through the contract that you have to be held accountable and they have to be held accountable. Michael.
Yeah.
Oh, Melanie.
Sure. No, I'll jump in, and maybe this is answering a different question, but coming in maybe from a different angle. Thinking for this particular contract, a new piece or condition that goes into the agreement is an incentive of sort. And so thinking of that from a compliance standpoint, maybe more so from a, how can we make sure that we meet these conditions to be able to recognize the incentive? Reveal was able to build something that really gives us visibility to how we're tracking to be able to realize that incentive, because it's something that perhaps the carrier hasn't been able or necessarily enthusiastic about sharing how we may be tracking towards that incentive.
Not surprising.
That's a great example, Melanie. Yeah.
Did you want to add anything there, Michael? On the compliance side?
When it comes to compliance, yeah, I mean, there's so many routes you can go. I think, yeah, Melanie, I mean, you outlined a great example, because to your point, there's a large financial incentive that Boot Barn has that the carrier doesn't have necessarily a motivation to fulfill or track in the same way that you do. And it's not always easy to gain visibility to that. I think the same is true in a lot of areas, right? I mean, rate audits could be an example of that as well, where obviously, you assume every carrier is attempting to bill correctly on the contracts and bill the correct charges, but there are mistakes that are made, right? And the carrier doesn't have a huge incentive to kind of self-guard and self-report and self-analyze to see where those issues might be. And so that's another example of compliance. So yeah, there's a lot of directions you could go with the compliance conversation, but those are a couple.
Well, and maybe compliance isn't the right word. Maybe holding them accountable, right, is maybe a better way to put it. All right. So I want to now talk to both of you and bring this all back sort of full circle. So can you talk about the collaborative process between Boot Barn and Reveal in identifying strategic opportunities for parcel shipping optimization and continuous improvement? Because like you said earlier, Michael, right, technology is a partnership. Right? This isn't necessarily a destination. This is something that you want to do and continually improve on and grow together. So, Michael, I'm going to start with you and then we'll go to Melanie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think strategy is always predicated on understanding where you are and where you want to go. And Melanie talked about this earlier. I mean, Boot Barn has hundreds of stores in 48 states. They're growing rapidly. Melanie, I had forgotten that you were adding, 50 or so stores over the next year. So, huge growth with store presence, but there's also the e-com presence that Boot Barn has with bootbarn.com, sheplers.com. And so, we're talking about optimizing through a complex omni-channel network. And when I think about, store fulfillment, think about e-com fulfillment. I mean, Melanie actually just also talked about vendor compliance as well, right? That's another component of the complexity. So, ongoing continuous improvement, we really have a methodology that where we work to unlock benefits in 4 strategic areas for a company like Boot Barn. So one of those would be around proactive planning, right? Every company needs the ability to accurately forecast, budget, and then even mitigate the impact of carrier rate changes and surcharges, at least until Melanie's superpowers kick in and she vanquishes those. So that proactive planning piece is critical. I'll harken back to the stat you used to, Sarah, at the beginning where you said, hey, average cost per package is increased by whatever it was, close to 7%. It's like, wait a minute, that's a full percentage point higher than the carrier's announced GRI, right? Which full percentage point really means like 15 or so percent higher. And what that means is that there are embedded increases in things like the surcharges that are higher than the average service level rate increases, right? So the ability to understand that at the service level, at the surcharge level, by weight break, et cetera, and be able to forecast, that's all part of planning, right? Which our technology does. So that's number one. Number two is data-driven measurement, right? So leveraging those advanced analytics tools we talked about to measure the vital shipping factors. And Melanie used that word, right? Vital factors. Vital factors in Reveal language are just KPIs, right? And every shipper is going to have the exact same KPIs, or at least you should, right? It's your service spend, your surcharge spend, your cost per package, trends in zone, weight, and your minimums, right? Basically your price floors. And those are really the 6 key KPIs because that's what drives your spend, right? Now, there's going to be other KPIs like on-time performance, time in transit, all sorts of things that you can measure. But in terms of what's driving your spend, those are the right things to measure, right? And so Boot Barn actually measuring those things continuously allows them to optimize for operational efficiencies and identify areas for improvement. The third thing is continuous monitoring, right? And that means monitoring carrier agreements. Melanie mentioned expiring terms, changes to revenue tiers, surcharges, right? Even monitoring the incentives you've negotiated with carriers. So again, just having a set of tools to drive that compliance gives you control. And then the final thing is strategic optimization, right? Boot Barn right now, if they were to receive a proposal from another carrier who's not a primary carrier for them today, or a new proposal or addendum from one of their existing carrier partners, they could run that proposal through a simulation in our technology, which would allow them to understand exactly the impact of those pricing changes, right? Down to the charge level. So having that kind of toolkit and then that ongoing methodology really is kind of what I think through when I think about identifying those strategic opportunities for ongoing improvement.
Awesome. And so what do you think about that, Melanie, when he talks about, those key metrics, like how did you measure the success of your partnership with Reveal? And then looking ahead to the future, how do you see the future? Obviously, you're expanding the growth. How do you see that partnership continuing to grow and them supporting you in those initiatives?
Sure. Since the inception of our new contract, on a weekly basis, I've been going in and looking on their platform, looking at our average spend by carton, by service, comparing it to prior year, basically before this new contract, and each week easily confirming that we're on track to maintain the level of savings that we expected to see with the new agreement. Our new distribution center, I guess this is a recent addition of a metric that is going to be useful for us to support the addition of the distribution center that we opened in Kansas City. That building is expected to take over a lot of the store distribution for our stores here in the Midwest, as well as out East. And so we've got visibility now. If we're looking at our average zone, for example, by
Mhm.
service level, to be able to track and see that now it's no longer Fontana having to ship to zone 6, 7, 8. You know,
Right.
Kansas City is picking it up and doing zone 3, 4, and 5. So that's a couple of ways that we've been able to utilize these metrics to really see that we're on track to accomplish some of our own initiatives. And I'm sorry, what was the second question?
The second question was just about the future, right? Like what I know you're looking at growth and you're looking at pretty much major growth, right? Because you're doubling in growth. I was just wondering, how does Reveal sort of how do you see them supporting those efforts and really growing with you?
Sure. Um, well, like I mentioned, and like everybody's mentioned, I guess we're adding more stores, right? And as we continue to add more stores in the eastern portion of the United States, possible that we'll end up adding another distribution center in that region. Again, to the point of KCI, that it would also, Kansas City, that it would also help reduce the zones that we're shipping across. And obviously, I think there's a role there for Reveal to play in continuing to provide that analysis and reporting that really shows that we're shipping more efficiently and spending that money more efficiently. Another initiative is investigating whether a slightly larger carton size for our store distribution program would result in a net savings, right? It's a larger package. We'll probably pay a little more to ship it, but we'll be shipping fewer cartons. And so being able to validate that the bigger carton is still saving us in spend because we're shipping fewer cartons.
Yeah, yeah. And I heard about a story recently where they changed the packaging and they ended up not profitable at all because they were spending all their money on shipping charges just because they changed the packaging, which is a crazy, crazy story. All right. So now it's time for us to get to the audience questions. So if you have any questions, make sure to put them in the Q&A because now is the time for us to get to those ever-pressing questions. Now, I want to ask you, Michael, for one of the questions, how does Reveal keep its parcel spend management tools flexible for the ever-changing retail world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the retail world is so fascinating because of the complexity involved, right? And you can think of Boot Barn's network for that. We already talked about, having a multi-nodal network, right, with multiple DCs. Think about an omni-channel strategy with store fulfillment, with e-com fulfillment, sometimes dropship fulfillment. You think about companies that are either, multi-brand, which, again, Scheffler's, Boot Barn, for Boot Barn, there are all sorts of complexities involved here. And so keeping a parcel spend management tool, especially a technology flexible, relies on having a data transformation layer that can actually translate the carrier billing data into the language of the end consumer, in this case, the shipper, right? And so Melanie talked about that, right? Being able to customize reports that speak their business language and meet their business requirements, right? Because the technology is only fulfilling its need for the customer, especially, again, kind of modern, next gen, cutting edge technology. It's only fulfilling its use case if the end user doesn't have to do their own data transformation, right? Like everyone has talked about for decades, you got to scrub the data, you got to manipulate the data, do pivot tables, like all of those things should be done now, right? You shouldn't have to do any of that, right? All of the reporting and analytics tools should be embedded in the technology platform. So again, it's that data transformation layer that transforms the carrier data into something that's usable and actionable for the shipper that I think really is the differentiator.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Now we've got another question around the integration piece that you just mentioned. Does Reveal platform integrate with carriers directly for shipment, billing related data, or does that come from shipper to Reveal?
The short answer is yes, Reveal integrates directly to the carriers. So yeah, we receive all the carrier data directly from the carriers on behalf of our customers. Standard streamlined hands-off process for the shipper, right? So the shipper doesn't have to be involved with handling data and handing it to Reveal. What I will say though is what tends to make our engagements much more valuable to our customers is actually getting some order data or warehouse data from our customers as part of the ongoing data feed, right? So the way it would typically work is we get order data from our customers, right? Because carriers don't have access to that data, but it's pertinent and relevant to the shipping activity. So if we can get the order data from our customers and then we get the billing data from the carriers, now we can match those, right? You can think of it as an order match or an integration, but we match those. Now you've got this really robust data set that tells the entire story of the order fulfillment. And that allows a lot of really robust things that includes, real-time accruals, for example, because there's always a delay in carrier billing data, but there's not a delay in us getting order data from our customers. So real-time accruals is something it unlocks.
Nice.
It also can unlock things like SKU level profitability, right? I can't tell you how many times we've helped customers identify that certain products they're shipping, they're actually underwater on, because every time they ship it, they get hit with like an oversized fee or an unauthorized package charge. That's not quite as relevant in Melanie's case because they're shipping small boxes, right? But for our customers, especially if you're shipping heavier and larger product, that's a really relevant use case.
But also, as Melanie looks to potentially change the size of the box too, right? Like you were just talking about, you need to take a look at some of these things. So for both of you, what are the trickiest parts for retailers when they're setting up parcel spend management, and how do they get past them? Maybe Melanie, I'll get you to answer this one first.
I would say really getting started and starting right. You should probably really focus on laying the framework and understanding your supply chain network. I would draw a parallel to GL coding, right? For us, we've got everything segmented. Is this a vendor shipment? Is this a internal shipment? Is it an e-commerce shipment? Really understanding, because for us, those are different sub operations, if you will, and they're each going to have kind of their own varying metrics. It's obviously less expensive to ship to a store than it is to a house. So store over e-com, and really just understanding you've got little mini businesses in amongst your supply chain operation that you're going to want to manage those metrics separately. So laying the framework, I think, is key.
What would you say, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's just around general change management, right? Anytime a company onboards with a new technology solution, there's always, learning kind of how the technology works and how to maximize the benefits. There's that I talked in, a few minutes ago about data transformation, right? There's us as the technology provider understanding how does, Boot Barn, for example, how does your business work uniquely? How does your business need to understand requirements? I think Melanie there's an executive report, right, that you've been filling out manually for some time. Right now, we're in the process of just automating that report so that instead of spending time every week having to build the report, now you can just leverage the insights from the report and do something about it more quickly. And so those are the types of things that it might take, a few months to really learn one another. But again, that's just change management with any technology. So it's really about having open, robust lines of communication. And, I'll give you a compliment here, Melanie. Melanie's never afraid to ask for what she wants or what she needs, even if she doesn't know whether we can deliver, right? I can think about a couple things even within the last few weeks that fall into that category. So I'd say, again, feel free to press your parcel spend management provider on what you think they should be able to deliver for you. If the answer keeps coming back, no, chances are they probably aren't the right partner for you.
Absolutely. All right. One last question before we get to our final question. Michael, what do you think is on the horizon for parcel spend management in the retail world? Give us sort of a glimpse into your crystal ball.
Well, there's a lot coming in the industry in general. Some of it has to do with just emerging carrier providers and couriers. And so for parcel spend management companies, it's supporting a wider and wider carrier base. Some of it would be around changes in pricing, whether it be things like dynamic pricing or flat rate pricing, or even thinking about like the gig economy, like surge pricing, elements like that might start to work their way into to carrier pricing. So there are those factors that I think parcel spend management providers are just going to need to support to keep up with what's going on in the industry. But what gets us really excited at Reveal is thinking about what are the tools we can put in our customers' hands that help provide additional value. And, I'm not going to give away our product roadmap on this call here, but we're working on some really exciting kind of simulation, what if scenario based tools that are just going to give, again, shippers more ability to quickly understand, what different changes in their program might have in terms of an effect, not only on their spend, but also on their transit times, right? And so they're going to be able to make decisions more quickly, and decisions ultimately that are more aligned with their desired outcomes.
Well, that was the final question. So thank you so much to everyone. If we did not get to all of your questions, please do reach out on socials or reach out to Supply Chain Brain or Reveal directly if you have a burning question that we didn't have time to answer. So to wrap things up, I want to ask each of you to give me one key takeaway that you want the audience to walk away from this session, maybe thinking about or taking action on. So Melanie, I'm going to start with you and then we'll end with you, Michael.
One takeaway, I would say, the moral of the story here is that even if you've got your carrier agreements memorized, your rates, your terms, you're shipping the same box back and forth the same amount of times every week, there really is no set it and forget it. If you're wanting to effectively manage your spend, optimization is, obviously you've got to look at it as a continuous effort. It requires visibility and awareness, not just of your past usage, but your future projected, usage, and being able to quickly react and step in and make adjustments if you need to before it's too late. And so if you don't already have a way to have that awareness and be able to be constantly looking at, but regularly looking and knowing where you stand, you need to do that.
Well, and also, what do you want your future to look like? Do you want to be updating reports manually? Or do you want to have trusted data at your fingertips so that you can just, have reliable data and keep moving on with your day, right? I think that's what we want to all ask ourselves as well. All right. Final question to you, Michael. What's one takeaway? What's something that you'd like everybody to take action on leaving from this conversation today?
Yeah, well, Melanie's was so good there, that optimization is an ongoing process. So I wish that was the one that I had chosen, but I'll go back to what I said at the beginning of the webinar, which is that most shippers today, are adversely impacted to some level by a lack of transparency in our industry. And that's either from their carrier partners or from the consultants that they've trusted to serve as an extension of their team. And I want to be clear, but by no means am I saying that everyone is out to take advantage of shippers. There are a lot of great people working in the carrier world and in the consulting world. But even the best intentions are subject to human error. And technology is the solution to that problem. Frankly, it wasn't until the last year or two that the technology actually existed for shippers to really do all of the things that parcel spend management firms have done, leveraging people and teams for the last decade. But that technology does exist now. And so for any company focused on reducing spend, improving transit performance, automating repeatable work to free up associates to focus on the pressing issues that really move the needle for their organization, my parting words to you would be that if you haven't fully embraced the technology that's now available to shippers, I want you to know that there's a better way and that it's really easy to get started.
Easy to get started. Well, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. Thank you to Supply Chain Brain for being our fabulous co-host for this session. And thank you so much for joining me, Michael and Melanie. It's been a real pleasure to go behind the scenes at Boot Barn with you. And thanks for sharing your challenges, your transformation, the incredible collaboration with Reveal that helped to make all of that possible. You've shared so much insight and plenty of ideas for our audience to take back to their own organizations. So how much money are you leaving on the table? Well, head over to revealgroup.com today to sign up and connect your carrier data to see what shipping intelligence can do for you for free. Thank you again for everybody for joining us, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.